What up everybody, it's Ipadbeatmaking.com, and today we're going to take another look at this unique DAW that I'm sure many of you had on your mobile device, opened it up, looked at it, tried it out, and immediately said, this isn't for me. Believe it or not, we actually believe that this DAW that has no AUV3 capability currently is a dark horse on the iOS platform. And by dark horse we mean has the potential to usurp and even overtake some of your most beloved DAWs without anyone seeing it coming. So sit back, relax, and stay tuned as we tell you all about the ghost in the machine. Why do we say ghost in the machine? Well, we'll get to that. Now before we begin, please be sure to hit the like button if you enjoy this video, as well as the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on the latest news, tips, tricks, sales, updates, beats, and more. Now if you mistook the FL and FL Studio Mobile to mean Florida, we wouldn't blame you. It's tropically colored, flat as it gets, and just like Florida, surprises you in both the best and weirdest ways and picks the most awkward things to be absent of. First off, this genetically modified offspring of its mother Fruit, the famed FL Studio, bears nearly no resemblance to its parent at first. Mama Fruit's layout is complex but seemingly necessary, and it's actually organized well in its own way. The baby Fruit, FL Studio Mobile, is filled with hidden pockets and pop-outs all over the place that you don't know you need until you know you need them. For instance, unlike most DAWs, there is no playhead that's always visible. It's instead tethered to the virtual keyboard or drum pad screen that's at the bottom right. But as we peel back the layers a bit, we start to recognize some of those FL Studio staples such as the step sequencer, and that's just where it begins. This DAW that I at once dismissed for not looking and feeling pro has started to look more and more like it's from the future, and that I've just been stuck in the past. Now, this will by no means be a super in-depth tutorial about FL Studio Mobile, but I just want to highlight a couple things that we can get on the same page about the app's layout. Now, if we look at it with all of the side pockets put away, we have what they refer to as the playlist in view. The play icon located on the top left can both play the track, and holding it will turn it into a record button. Now, below that, tapping any of the tracks to the left will expand the track mixer view, which allows you to mute, solo, pan, and control volume. And directly to the right on the other side of the app, we have our rack module, which hosts our effects for the selected track. Up at the top right, we have our home button, which allows us to save, adjust settings, shop, import files, and more. And in the bottom right corner, we have a button that allows our keyboard or drum pads to pop out. And once we pull that out, we see that we get our transport, including record, play, tempo, and one thing you may not notice in the keyboard view is that if you pinch the zoom just above the piano key bed, you can resize the piano keys. This is a clever approach, but it isn't exactly clear from the looks of the interface. And to the left, in order from left to right, we have our mixer button, our pitch and mod piano wheels, and a button for a second piano key bed. Now, in the pads view, we lose the pitch and mod wheel button as well as the second piano button, instead being left with a mixer button and a lock button that stops the pads from being able to be rearranged. Now, dipping back into the view of the playlist or our main sequencer, you'll see that by selecting a track on the playlist, a menu pops up that allows us to copy, delete, snap it to the grid, edit, which takes us to the piano roll, step sequencer, automation editor, or wave editor. This can also be accessed by double tapping the track, and continuing on, there's the more button, and if we hit the more button, we get cut, combine, mute, and unmute. And for the last part of this overview, I want to take you into the step sequencer view, where there's a tiny but mighty tab to the bottom left that allows you to change velocity, panning, pitch, and no repeat or roll, allowing what initially appeared simple to become a drum programming powerhouse with infinite possibilities, and in a package that really isn't intimidating. It almost encourages you to try new things just to see what they sound like. Things that would be painfully tedious in another DAW are executed with enough ease for a young child to grasp. Interesting. Now, one thing I like to find out early about a DAW is if I can control the playhead with a MIDI controller. So let me make my position clear. Cubasis 3 and Nano Studio 2 will be the last DAWs to get a pass from me on this. Those are undeniably good, and you're only doing yourself a disservice by skipping those. Despite all the futuristic technology that we have in the touchscreen, the fact of the matter is, sometimes I just want to have a traditional piece of hardware in front of me. I want to be able to push play on that piece of hardware and it move the timeline forward. I want to hit rewind, I want to stop, things like that. I don't always want to have to be tethered to touching the screen. But when I do want to touch the screen and do these things, I also want a tactile experience that is reflective of that. So I really want a nice balance between on-screen keyboard and hardware compatibility. Yes, FL Studio Mobile can control the playhead with a MIDI controller. QWERTY keyboard didn't give me the same success, but I'll take the win wherever I can get it. Now, if you know Ipadbeatmaking, the first thing we want to see is how those drums are laid out. Can we bring in our own samples? How playable are the pads, etc., etc.? We want an experience that encourages playability, experimentation, easy workflow, all the things that really get you settled into a DAW. And for us, the drums are at the center of what we like to put together. We usually build around the drums or always build with the drums in mind. So having a situation that makes things very playable and easy is ideal. And this is the reason that apps like Beatmaker 3 always win people's top choice of DAW, because the drums are at the center of the action and people just tend to like to work that way when dealing with electronic music, hip-hop, R&B, things like that. And I'm not gonna lie, the first thing we thought was, what the is this? They're laid out on this honeycomb system and there's 22 pads. 22. The weirdest and most random number in the history of drum pad layouts. Have you ever heard of 22 drum pads before? I've only really heard of intervals of 4 or 8, things like that. Never really 22. It doesn't quite fit into anything I've ever seen before. And it was at this point that I nearly swiped up and killed the app, but no. Don't be afraid, I thought to myself. Don't laugh at it. Take it seriously. Why? Because FL Studio, or Fruity Loops as it was formerly known, has always taken a very unique approach to things. They go from laughably unconventional to the most used and most productive features in a DAW that other DAWs still don't have today. And I've got to respect their mind, their track record, and the fact that they are leaders, not followers, and this is no exception. So I started to look at one of the stock kits and worked on resetting my mind and instead try to think of it as though I had never seen it done in any other way before, because as humans we're just conditioned from our past experiences, right? So if I've never experienced a drum pad layout before on a phone, what would I expect it to look like? And as I had this frame of mind, I touched the pad for just a moment too long and moved my finger with some drag, and then the pad moved. Interesting. I've never seen a DAW have pads so easily altered, and it's of no consequence inside the layout of the step sequencer. Huh, very nice. So I took that as a cue and I held the device in my hand, looked where my hand naturally wanted to rest, and then it all made sense. I would build out 16 pad kits and lay the pads out in a way that allowed them to be used like a video game controller. That way you could comfortably hold an iPhone or iPad or even an Android device and play your drums with ease. I realized at that moment that this was one of the most innovative drum sequencing concepts on iOS, and one that no one was talking about. Again, ImageLine, the makers of FL Studio way of seeing things, was admittedly better. I immediately straightened up in my chair and started taking this DAW much more seriously. Digging deeper into the drum instrument, things got deeper still. In the step sequencer, I was able to control velocity, roll, pitch, and more. And in a way that was just so musical. Everything started to make sense, and I began to see that maybe, just maybe, the other DAWs were doing it wrong. I also really enjoyed the fill option for spacing sounds in a way that's musical, that makes sense, things like hi-hats. You see this kind of thing also in Zenbeats, which makes its step sequencer really nice, really unique for iOS, and FL Studio has its own approach to doing it as well that's very intuitive. So needless to say, after really kind of digging in between the honeycomb pads in the video game configuration, as well as using the step sequencer, it didn't take long to get something going. And even if you're not really good with making drums and things like that, this makes it so easy for you that you're bound to come up with something that's very cool, musical, and much more complex than you naturally would have thought to make it from the outset. Moving on from there, I dug into one of their plugins called Direct Wave, which is a simple sampler that allows you to bring in your own wave files. And that's where I found the next bit of striking innovation that, again, no one was talking about. And this is how when you import a sound, you can tap its name and all of a sudden the sound plays. Not only that, you can tap left or right and it plays a corresponding piano key representing what it sounds like when you play it at various notes. I could literally audition the sound I had in mind with ease, no need to even bring it in if it wasn't going to fit my idea. Image Line again was showing innovation in areas that I never thought needed to be innovated. Now, Direct Wave is good for things like 808s and maybe building out some of your own instruments. It's by no means Beatmaker 3 with the sampler, but it's there. While I was initially disappointed by its limitations, it began to make sense when I added its little siblings by hitting the plus sign. Very complex effect chains can be built very easily and musically. That's a word I've said about a few things with this app, and I'm gonna keep saying. Musical. Not the most capable or feature-rich, but it's extremely musical. Take this for instance. I'm able to very easily take this 808 and give it life and punch. And I'm doing it without a third-party plugin, and there's no convoluted menus to sort through in order to do this. You can also easily add automation to a track in a way that I've never seen done before. Simply hit the button that's got 3 dots to the right of the play button, and there it is. And while I'm talking about automation, let me show you this cool feature that they have in its automation editor that gives you a new approach to understanding just what's going on with your levels as you're drawing in your automation. Now, in this example, I'll show you just how clutch this is. The leveler plugin is currently at 0, and no one would blame you for thinking that that should be 100% in the automation editor. But as you can see, there's a line here just visible that helps you understand exactly where it's at. In this case, it's around 74. This is incredibly simple, yet incredibly clever. And I'll say it again, musical. Now I can demo the plugin at a certain level and know exactly where I'm at so that I can automate everything with accuracy. Now, we're gonna get to that Ghost in the Machine reference, I promise, but first, I'm gonna touch very briefly on the rest of the included virtual instruments. Obviously, we've got the drum sequencer with its honeycombs, which I already touched on, and as previously stated, Direct Wave is a sample player, and while there are some patches included, you can also load up your own or buy more from their store. MiniSynth is, quote, a fully featured synthesizer with a low processor overhead and great sound. There are thousands of patches available for it on the user forums, or you can create your own. GMS, or Groove Machine Synth, is a multi-timbral hybrid synthesizer and effects channel from the FL Studio PC version Groove Machine plugin. It has a dual oscillator architecture. It can operate in subtractive, FM, RN, and sync modes, making it the most flexible and powerful synthesizer in FL Studio Mobile. And we have Supersaw. Supersaw recreates 2 massive and classic synth sounds, Supersaws and Oscillator Sync. Supersaw is a great synth to quickly create electronic dance music style sounds, including massive stereo pads and leads. Load the presets or create your own sounds from scratch. There are 7 main tabs covering the synthesizer controls: OSC, Filter, LFO, Level, Mod, Voices, and Effects. And finally, Transistor Bass is a monophonic bassline style synthesizer for creating resonant style basslines and leads. Again, those are just brief introductions to these instruments, and I encourage you to check out other videos for a more comprehensive walkthrough of those instruments. And now I want to get to the Ghost in the Machine. Well, it has a feature that you just don't see in other DAWs, something called Ghost Notes. And when I first saw this for iOS in an app, it blew my mind. I was using a Rolly light pad to come up with a chord, really didn't feel like being too thoughtful, didn't have the time, living life. And I hit a chord, okay, thought the chord sounded pretty good. Then I hit another chord that was in conjunction with it, put those chords together. Now I didn't know what the chord I'd actually hit was. I had no idea what I was really doing, where I was gonna take it. And I go into the piano roll of the next sound, and there are the notes I just played on another layer. They're tinted just differently than the background itself, and you can see them clearly, and those are ghost notes. Those are a guide that tells you what you've been playing throughout this track, and now you can sit there and build a track in the piano roll following your ghost notes. This is so useful and tactile, especially on a mobile device where you might not have a piano or something in front of you. You can just follow the ghost notes, drawing them in with your finger or your pencil, and before you know it, you can come up with a very musical sounding track with ease. You just would use the root notes for your bass, and you would put them together in a pattern that you saw fit, and then you could start to come up with melodies by chopping up those ghost chords and moving them in a way that was still musical, still intuitive, but really easy to come up with, and it allows for very easy experimenting. I would argue that ghost notes is one of the secret weapons that the desktop producer really uses. Folks that use FL Studio tend to get a lot done extremely fast, and I believe that ghost notes is a huge part of their workflow. And again, another feature that no one is talking about that's completely innovative, that's completely new to iOS. Fruity Loops or FL Studio has always been an incredible story to me. Like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly or the ugly duckling becoming the swan. It's always done things its own way, which gets laughed at first, but before you know it, it glows up. And that is where I believe FL Studio Mobile is going. Now, why do I think this? Why shouldn't we just abandon this app here and now for its more advanced counterparts? Well, one of the biggest things for me was, is it going to get AUV3 support? Is this just a gimmick, or is there a plan to keep this app going, the development going? Well, I checked the update history. It seems that they are serious about keeping this app updated. No developer continuously updates an app for it to be a joke. So I thought, all right, maybe there's more to it than that. I go to the forums and someone brings up AUV3, and their response was, and this is very promising, because I can tell you this, with just a few improvements and the addition of audio units, this app is going to the moon. Laugh at us now if you want, but seriously, if you just took the time to unpack it, I think you might change your mind about just how much of a toy the app is. It's simple, but it's capable. It's unique, but it's an artist for the artist in a way. It's very musical. And these are just a few things that I think make FL Studio Mobile incredibly special and a dark horse in the race. And I think that if these other DAW makers don't incorporate some of these unique approaches that ImageLine has taken, the maker of FL Studio Mobile, that slowly but surely they will eat up market share after this AUV3 update drops. So, you heard it here first. I've predicted, I'm putting my money on the table, that FL Studio Mobile becomes one of the prominent DAWs on iOS. I mean, why not? They've already got the brand recognition. Nearly everybody who comes from there onto the mobile platform is gonna try it out just because it's a name they're familiar with. If they add AUV3s to this app, look out. So, what do you think? Have you tried FL Studio Mobile? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Now that we mentioned it in this video, are you going to give it a second look if you have and have dismissed it? Are you currently using FL Studio Mobile as your main DAW? We want to know. Let us know down in the comment section, and be sure to check out some of the most innovative kits available for FL Studio Mobile, as well as all the major DAWs on iOS at Ipadbeatmaking.com. We've got Mario's Trap there. You can check it out free of charge. That way you can see if the workflow works for you. Be sure to check out Trap Kit, the Pop Drums and Billboard Kit. We're sure you're gonna love it. It's gonna help your workflow increase tenfold inside of that DAW. And with that said, we're gonna get up out of here. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, please be sure to hit the like button, as well as subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on the latest news, tips, tricks, sales, updates, beats, and more. It's Ipadbeatmaking.com. Peace.